The rain had not stopped for 3 days in the small village of Somerset. It came softly at first, whispering against rooftops, then settled into a steady rhythm, one that matched the slow beating of a lonely heart. On the edge of the village, near the old railway bridge, stood a faded blue house. Its paint peeled, its windows fogged from the cold, and its garden long forgotten. Every morning, at exactly 9, a golden Labrador sat at the gate, still, patient, eyes fixed on the road that curved into the distance. His name was Toby. He had been waiting there for nearly 2 years. Villagers often saw him, sitting there rain or shine, tail still, gaze unwavering. Some stopped to pat his head, others left a biscuit or a piece of bread. Children waved to him on their way to school. But Toby never moved until sunset, when he would finally walk back into the empty house, curl beside the door, and sleep with his nose pressed against an old pair of boots that still carried the scent of the man he loved. His owner, Daniel Harris, had been gone for so long that most people in the village stopped talking about him. They said he'd moved to the city for work, or perhaps gone abroad. Some whispered darker things. But Toby didn't know what rumors meant. He only knew that one morning, Daniel had walked out of the gate with his rucksack and had never come back. The memory was still sharp in his mind. The sound of Daniel's voice, the pat on his head, the soft promise. "I'll be back soon, boy. Be good, yeah." Toby had waited by the gate that entire day, tail thumping each time footsteps passed. But Daniel didn't return. The next day he waited again, and the next, until waiting became his life. The first winter after Daniel left was harsh. Snow fell thick and heavy, covering the village in white silence. Mrs. Walker, the old woman from across the lane, took pity on Toby. She left out warm food and sometimes coaxed him into her kitchen. He would stay for a while, lying near her stove, but when the clock struck 9, he would scratch at the door, asking to go back outside. She always sighed but opened it for him. "He'll catch his death one day," she'd mutter. "But I can't keep him from waiting." Toby sat in the same spot, day after day, through rain, snow, and wind. His fur lost its shine, his paws grew rough, but his eyes never changed. They held the same hope, quiet and fierce. Sometimes strangers would stop their cars, take pictures or call to him. But Toby only tilted his head, confused, as if wondering why everyone kept stopping except the one he was waiting for. Inside the house, nothing had moved. Dust settled on the shelves, spider webs stretched across the corners. But Toby still guarded it faithfully, his world revolving around the sound of distant footsteps that never came. One autumn evening, a boy named Jamie, who often walked by with his mother, stopped beside Toby. The sun was setting behind the hills, bathing the road in gold. Toby's eyes caught the light, glowing softly. Jamie knelt down. "You're still waiting, aren't you?" he whispered. Toby's ears twitched. The boy smiled sadly. "My dad went away too. Mum says he's with the stars now." Toby leaned forward and licked the boy's hand, a quiet gesture of understanding that crossed the line between species and sorrow. After that, Jamie came often. He brought biscuits, sometimes an old tennis ball. Toby rarely played, but he let the boy sit beside him, both of them watching the road together in silence. One afternoon, Mrs. Walker came to Jamie's mother. "It's not right, him being out there alone," she said. "That dog's heart will break before it stops." But Jamie's mother only shook her head softly. "It already has." By the next spring, the garden had begun to grow wild. Grass crept over the path. Flowers bloomed untended. Toby's fur turned grayer around the muzzle, and he limped slightly when he walked. But every morning, he still dragged himself to the gate and sat there, waiting. Then, one morning, something changed. A car pulled up at the end of the road. The sound of an engine, unfamiliar yet familiar, stirred Toby's memory. He lifted his head, his heart beating faster. The car door opened. A man stepped out, tall, thin, with tired eyes. Toby froze. The man looked older, beard grown, shoulders stooped. But his voice, when he spoke softly, was unmistakable. "Toby." For a second, time stood still. The years melted away. The dog's ears perked, Tail trembled, and then, with a sound that broke the silence, Toby barked. Loud, desperate, joyful. He ran, stumbling, tail wagging wildly, leaping into Daniel's arms. Daniel dropped to his knees, tears flooding his face. "Oh, my boy, my good boy." He buried his face in Toby's fur, and the dog pressed closer, whining softly, as if afraid this was another dream that would disappear. They stayed like that for a long time, man and dog, together again after years of separation. But joy, as fragile as it is beautiful, never stays untouched. Daniel had returned home, but not for long. He had come back because he was sick. The doctors had told him the truth months ago. There was no cure, and when he realized his time was short, the only place he wanted to be was home. The place where someone had never stopped waiting. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Daniel sat by the window, Toby's head on his lap. The world outside looked peaceful. For the first time in years, both hearts were whole again. But life, cruel and kind all at once, was already counting the moments they had left together. The next few weeks were gentle, wrapped in a kind of quiet peace Daniel had forgotten existed. He had returned to his old home, the one that smelled faintly of dust and the faint sweetness of wood polish. Everything felt smaller now, stiller, but it was enough. Toby followed him everywhere, from the kitchen to the garden, from the chair by the fire to the edge of the bed at night. Daniel's health was failing quickly, but he hid it as best as he could. He didn't want Toby to worry. Every morning, he'd open the door and let the sunlight pour in, whistling softly like he used to. "Come on, boy," he'd say, voice cracking just a little. "Let's see if that road still remembers us." And together they'd walk. Slowly, Daniel leaning on his stick, Toby padding beside him, tail swaying lightly. The villagers watched quietly, some smiling, some holding back tears. They all knew the story. The man who left and the dog who never stopped waiting. Mrs. Walker came by often, bringing soup and freshly baked bread. "You're looking better, Daniel," she'd lie gently. He'd smile, knowing the truth. "I've got the best medicine anyone could ask for," he'd reply, patting Toby's head. "This one kept my heart beating long after I forgot why it should." At night, the house felt alive again. The fire burned bright, the clock ticked softly, and Daniel spoke to Toby like he was speaking to another soul. Because, in truth, he was. "You know," he said one evening, sitting by the window as rain tapped against the glass, "I thought I was doing you a kindness by leaving. I thought you'd forget me, move on. But you didn't, did you?" Toby looked up, ears perked, tail tapping once against the floor. Daniel smiled faintly. "You're better than any human I've ever known." As the days passed, his strength waned. Sometimes he would wake up coughing, breath shallow, hands trembling. Toby would whine softly, pressing close to him, eyes full of worry. Daniel would always whisper, "It's all right, boy. I'm still here." But each day his voice grew weaker. One afternoon, as Daniel sat outside, watching the hills bathed in gold, he noticed how Toby struggled to get up. His joints were stiff, his steps unsteady. 12 years of waiting had taken their toll. "You and me, we're getting old, aren't we?" Daniel murmured. "Guess that's what loyalty does. It stays until it can't." That night, a storm rolled in from the west. The wind howled through the trees. Rain lashed against the windows. Daniel woke coughing violently. Toby jumped up, barking softly, nudging his arm. Daniel tried to stand but stumbled. His legs gave out, and he fell to his knees beside the bed. "Toby," he gasped, clutching the edge of the blanket. Stay with me." Toby barked louder this time, circling him, licking his hands, pressing against him as if to lift him up. But Daniel's breath was fading. The world blurred. In that stormy darkness, he reached out blindly until he felt the warmth of Toby's fur beneath his fingers. He smiled weakly. "Good boy. Always my good boy." And then the storm took everything else. The thunder rolled, the house shook, and the light flickered out. By morning, the rain had stopped. The world outside was washed clean. Inside, Daniel lay still, his hand resting gently on Toby's head. Mrs. Walker found them like that. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "Oh my God!" She knelt beside them, her voice trembling. "He came back for you, didn't he, boy? He came back so you'd never have to wait again." Toby didn't move for hours. He stayed there, pressed close, breathing slow and shallow. When the men came to take Daniel, Toby followed, step for step, his tail low but steady. He sat beside the gate as they carried his master away, the same gate where he had waited for 2 years. The villagers watched, silent, as the golden dog lowered his head to the ground, eyes empty but calm. For the next few days, Mrs. Walker tried to care for him, but Toby refused food. He lay beside the boots that Daniel had worn, resting his chin on them just as he had done before. Sometimes he would lift his head, ears twitching, as if listening for a voice he still believed he could hear. On the 7th day, the evening sky turned orange and soft. The last light of the sun poured through the window, bathing the room in gold. Toby took one deep breath, his body trembling slightly. Then, without a sound, he closed his eyes. He went peacefully, the way only those do who have loved with their whole heart. When Mrs. Walker found him, she didn't cry right away. She just sat beside him, stroking his fur, whispering, "You kept your promise, didn't you, my brave boy?" She buried him under the oak tree at the edge of the garden, the spot where Daniel and Toby had sat together in those last days. The villagers came, leaving flowers, small toys, and scraps of notes written by children. One of them read, "He waited every day, and now he's finally home." Years drifted by like gentle whispers over the hills of the village. The world moved on, as it always does, but not a soul forgot the story of the man and his dog. Children still played near the oak tree where Toby lay buried, their laughter blending with the rustle of leaves. Sometimes they'd stop and place small pebbles or daisies on the mound, as if to say hello. And every now and then, someone new would move to the village, hear the tale from an old neighbor, and walk home with a strange heaviness in their heart. That mix of sorrow and awe only real love can leave behind. Mrs. Walker kept the old house for years. She couldn't bear to see it empty, so she tended to it as if Daniel and Toby might return at any moment. She oiled the door hinges, dusted the frames, and placed fresh flowers by the window. On quiet evenings, she'd sit in Daniel's old chair and swear she could still hear the soft sound of Toby's paws against the wooden floor. The clock still ticked on the mantelpiece, slow and steady, marking the rhythm of memories that refused to fade. One autumn morning, a family moved into the cottage. A young couple with a small daughter named Lily. The villagers told them the story of the man who came back for his dog, and how the dog, faithful to his last breath, waited even after death seemed to have taken him away. Lily would listen wide-eyed, clutching her blanket. That night, when she went to bed, she whispered softly into the quiet, "Good night, Toby," and something about that seemed to stir the air. The next morning, as the mist rolled through the fields, little paw prints appeared on the damp earth, leading from the oak tree to the cottage door. Lily's mother smiled when she saw them. "Must be the neighbor's dog," she said. But there wasn't one, not in that lane. As weeks passed, strange, gentle things began to happen. When Lily was sad, her toys would be found neatly arranged near her bed. When she cried, the faint sound of padding steps could be heard, as if a dog was walking across the room. Sometimes, in the stillness of night, her parents would hear her talking softly, giggling, whispering, "You're warm, Toby. Don't go yet." And though they never saw him, they began to believe. Not out of fear but comfort. Mrs. Walker, old and fragile now, would sometimes visit the oak tree and bring biscuits, laying them by the roots. "You're still keeping watch, aren't you?" she'd say. The wind would blow gently through the leaves as if answering her. One winter evening, a thick snow covered the village. Everything was silent and white. Lily's father looked out of the window and froze. "Come here," he whispered to his wife. Outside, there was a shape, faint, golden, almost glowing, walking toward the oak tree. It paused once, turned its head slightly, and vanished into the light of the snow. Spring came again. The first flowers bloomed near the oak tree, and the villagers noticed something beautiful. Where Toby had been buried, two small saplings had grown, their branches intertwined like clasped hands. From that day on, the villagers called it the Tree of Waiting. Lovers met there, children played under it, and travelers often stopped to rest in its shade. Those who sat quietly for a while swore they could feel a warmth beside them, like the brush of soft fur or the weight of a head resting gently on their knee. Years later, long after Mrs. Walker was gone and Lily had grown into a kind young woman, the legend of Toby and Daniel became more than a story. It became a promise. Promise that love, once true, never really dies. It waits. Not in clocks or in photographs, not even in words, but in the quiet places of the heart. Sometimes, when dusk fell and the sky turned gold, Lily would sit under the oak tree and whisper. He loved his owner more than his life, and life gave him forever to prove it. And the wind would stir the leaves softly, carrying her words through the valley. A reminder to all who listened that loyalty, the kind born of love, can outlast even time itself.